I know that was a really intense topic, but it couldn't be ignored. And so let's conclude with something else that also can't be ignored. There's an absolutely gigantic fight coming up in the UFC. By the time that the UFC goes live again for more TV, it's going to be this fight. It's going to be the trilogy fight between Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier. So last week I asked the question of whether or not, this is the time to be doing this trilogy. That's a question that's pretty much moot. It's happening. And so I think at this point the question that has to be asked is really, how do we want this thing to turn out? Which of these two fighters would actually be better for the sport if they won this trilogy? And to me, that's kind of a bit of a tough question. It tells you a lot about mixed martial arts for what it is. On one hand, I think that you have to ask yourself a question. And that is there actually an ethics of mixed martial arts? I think that there's no doubt in my mind that there definitely should be. But if there was an ethics of mixed martial arts, and that was what we were going to use to decide which of these two fighters we want to see win this fight, there would be no argument about it. The guy to cheer for would be, undisputably, Dustin Poirier. Pretty much everything about Dustin Poirier's career speaks to the best things about this sport. You're talking about a guy who came from, troubled circumstances, troubled youth, discovered martial arts and MMA, and he used that to turn his whole life around, to build himself a prosperous life. And now what he does with the fame and fortune that he's amassed is that he uses that to give the same opportunity to kids who are in the same background. With his Good Fight Foundation, they're out there building MMA gyms for kids to go and train at so they can take their fighting out of the streets and into a competitive cage, taking it from out of a place where if you have a fight, quite frankly, the only reason to have a fight in the streets is if you have a feeling of respect. And then they can take that to a place where two people are competing against each other, and they should be competing against each other from a place of mutual respect. I know that doesn't always happen in MMA, but to me that is the ideal. So there you go. There on the one hand, Dustin Poirier represents all of the best things about this sport. So on the other hand, we have to talk about Conor McGregor now. And as much as it pains me to say this, because Conor McGregor has a lot of fans, and I am one of them. In light of everything that I'm about to say, maybe I shouldn't be, but I am. And I can't seem to help myself as hard as I try. But if Dustin Poirier represents everything that is right with this sport, and he does, Conor McGregor has frequently represented everything that can be wrong with this sport. In the terms of the way that he treats his opponents, for the most part in his career, he has not treated his opponents with a whole lot of respect. A lot of people thought that it was really turning over a new leaf when he treated Donald Cowboy Cerrone with so much respect going into their the Red Penny Night fight. The last time that he fought Dustin Poirier, he was much more respectful to the Diamond than he was the first time around. And in both of those cases, he was much more respectful to those two men in those situations than he was to Khabib Nurmagomedov, which was what a lot of people have said was maybe the humbling experience for Conor McGregor. And unfortunately, it doesn't end there. Of course, there was all of the stuff that went on with him and Khabib, and really there were two sides to that. Make no mistake about it. But Conor was the one that definitely came out the strongest between the two, at least until after that fight, because to be honest with you, for quite a long time, I didn't think very much of Khabib at all. I thought that Khabib was a thug based on what he did immediately following that fight. But he has definitely changed my perspective on him since then. But Conor McGregor, of course, even more famously than any of those things, probably, was that incident where he where he punched that elderly gentleman in a bar because he basically refused a shot of his whiskey. That is basically, that's thug, tyrant behavior that I've said time and time again does not belong in this sport. And so with that in mind, should I be a fan of Conor McGregor? I guess probably not. I'm going to be honest with you. I have a difficult time squaring that circle. It doesn't change the fact that I am a fan of Conor McGregor. And maybe in that light was maybe one of the reasons why I was so happy to see him turn over this new leaf that we've seen out of Conor McGregor. And that's very refreshing. It's very much better for the sport. But the simple fact of the matter is that he does have a history there that can't be overlooked. And he's not the only one with this kind of a history either. I mean, I think at this point I am on record as talking about Mike Perry. He's has his own history like that. It's another case where he's a fighter who I think is pretty popular, but at the same time, I don't like him, specifically because of the kind of behavior that I've described here. Also on this fight on July 10th is Greg Hardy. He's going to be fighting Tai Tuivasa, and as I always cheer for whenever Greg Hardy steps in the cage, I am going to be hoping that Tai Tuivasa knocks him the fuck out. And Tai Tuivasa is actually probably one of the perfect guys to knock Greg Hardy the fuck out. Because with his history of domestic assault, against his previous girlfriend, no, this is not a guy that should be welcomed into this sport. He should be punished out of it. But with that one particular incident with Conor McGregor, the assault on the elderly gentleman, shouldn't we be saying the same thing about him? Probably. But of course, there are plenty of outstanding factors, in particular with Conor McGregor. I mean, he is a very fun fighter to watch. When he decides that he's going to do some trash talking in the lead up to a fight, he's a tremendously entertaining fighter to watch, and he makes this sport a lot of money. And that's probably the thing about it, is that no matter how many high-minded concepts that a person may wish to ascribe to this sport, at the end of the day, it is still a business. And if this sport is nothing but a business, then the best fighter to win this fight is going to be the guy who's going to continue to make it the most money, and that would be Conor McGregor. So I think that maybe you can understand, now that I've said all this, you can maybe understand why I view this fight as more of a dilemma than probably a lot of fighters do. Rather, I should say a lot of fans. Regardless of who wins this fight, I'm going to be happy with the result. I absolutely adore both of these fighters. I think that they are both great fighters, and I think that, in particular, with the reform of Conor McGregor over these past few years, I think that you can legitimately say now that they are both great men. Now, which of them is better overall for the sport? Please feel free to let me know your thoughts. Leave them in the comments below.